Blessings to all you who are tuning in either via YouTube or Facebook Live or eventually on the Padre Jay cast. Today, as we're moving through the month of February and this time of broadcasting, we hear this news, which is so exciting, that seems like our COVID time restrictions are being lifted. And no longer do we have to see ourselves from the eyes up. We can actually see our full picture of our faces. And I'm really looking forward to being able to do that. And our masks and all these mask schedules and things can go back to normal. And hopefully over the next few months, we'll be able to get back to what life was like a little bit in terms of some of the COVID time restrictions and things. And I feel like it's providential that today I have a guest coming on to speak to and to be able to really respond to some of the deep, maybe psychological challenges that there are in our communities, and especially with this whole COVID time, Corona time challenges. And so why don't we just begin with a little prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, you wonderfully created us, and it's in your image and likeness that we want to live from, and it's on your lap that we want to just be able to see and feel the world. So that's it's your creative love, it's your divine power that nurtures us, that loves us, and is able to help heal us if anything has gone awry in our life. We come back to your lap, Daddy, just to want to be close to you, to be able to, have us really recognize your providential care in our lives. We ask for the Spirit to come upon us in this conversation so that every day we can be closer to Jesus. In a special way, I'd like to just say this little prayer to Saint Dymphna. Good Saint Dymphna, great wonder worker in every affliction of mind and body, I humbly implore your powerful intercession with Jesus through Mary, the health of the sick, and in the present, anybody who has any mental needs or mental health care situations. Saint Dymphna, martyr of purity, patroness of those who suffer with nervous and mental afflictions, beloved child of Jesus, of Mary, pray for them and obtain their request. Amen. I'm blessed as a priest now of over 15 years to be able to work with young people. And I always remember as 8th grade, and we had all the kids telling us what saint they were choosing. And this one dear 8th grade girl says Saint Dymphna. And I was like, Saint Dymphna? Who is Saint Dymphna? And she goes, Saint Dymphna is the patron saint or the patroness of those with mental health care needs. And I said, well, why did you choose her? And she goes, well, most of my friends are either thinking of suicide or are cutting, and I wanted a way to pray and minister to them. And I'm like, this was an 8th grade girl who was basically saying that a lot of her friends were deeply entrenched in depression and acting out on it. And I'm like, oh, that's St. Dymphna is somebody who I need to become a friend with too, because I'm not perfect either and need good mental health care. And so hopefully today we could kind of puncture, well, that's probably not the best word. We can open up our minds to those who have resistance around the world of psychology and of mental health care, of like Catholic mindfulness concepts, and recognize that we were blessed, we're wonderfully made. And so sometimes in our relationships, especially in our family dynamics or just trauma that happens, our brains and our psychology can be damaged. And just like if you have a trauma with your leg, you need to go to a doctor to help get your leg fixed with a cast or whatever, or surgery. It's the same thing with our psychology. And so I'm really excited about today's guest to be able to speak deeper into this, especially as Catholics. And sometimes maybe we over-spiritualize things, or we definitely just do away with any psychological things, just push it down. That's the typical thing. Keep that rigid religion together so that we don't have to face the real stuff inside. So as long as we're dressed up on the outside, almost like a mascot, then we'll be fine. And I think that what this guest is doing for us today is going to be a great way for us to maybe lean into some areas of healing and of happiness and of joy that perhaps we never thought we could discover. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring Dr. Greg Bottaro onto our program here, Exploring Catholicism. Doctor, it's so great to have you on board here. We have a good mutual friend and Father Kim Schreck.
Oh, yeah.
He was just skiing, and I said, I have to have like a good question to get Dr. Greg a little bit off his game at the beginning, just to see. And so he had me fire out this question too. So I'm going to throw it out to you. You do not have to answer it, but it would be interesting So I hear that you had the Property Brothers, the HGTV people come on. And so in the background, perhaps that actual setting that you're on was maybe a part of that TV program that helped do your house there. He noticed when he watched it that you had a black eye and that they put makeup on you. So first of all, did you have the HDD TV people come and help your show? And more importantly, what happened to your eye?
Wow, that's awesome. That first of all, he called me on that. Second of all, that he noticed that he thought to ask me that question. And I have to tell you right now, I have totally forgotten why I had a black eye in that show. I feel like it was something really silly. And it was like I was wrestling and caught an elbow to the eye, I think is what happened.
That's what the story was. You were
so he knew the story.
At a friend's house. There was a friend's house, and he was teaching you techniques about something, and you got an elbow.
Oh, okay. I totally remember now. So we had a men's group. I know this is why he would know it, because his brother was there.
Exactly.
We had a men's group, and we called in this guy who is he's Secret Service. He's part of this group of guys that we all pray together and hang out sometimes. And he was teaching us knife defense skills. And so he had a set of like rubber knives that he used to train his Secret Service trainees. So he brought up this box of these plastic knives and then was teaching these different moves. And then he had us pair off and we were sparring with each other. And at one point, somebody who I was sparring with got a little too aggressive and didn't like the knife limitation, so then started throwing elbows, and I took one to the face. So Property Brothers producers were not happy with me that I was engaging in such behavior in the middle of filming, but they had to get makeup on it so that I could show up in the show.
Well, that's what friends are for. So you can thank Father Kim Schreck for that.
I owe him a great thank you. Yes,
you do. You definitely owe him a great thank you. I should give a proper introduction to Dr. Bottaro. Bottaro is a clinical psychologist, founder of the Catholic Psych Institute, and his newest project, which is the IDD Mentorship project. He is a licensed psychologist. He received his doctorate in clinical psychology from the Institute of Psychological Science, a graduate school in Arlington, Virginia, that integrates Catholic philosophy and theology with sound, empirical, valid psychology. Before his degree, Dr. Bottaro discerned a religious vocation with the Franciscan Friars of Renewal. He lived for 4 years in the Bronx, serving the poor in the tradition of St. Francis Assisi. He learned how to discern God's voice and life in service. He is now currently married to Barbara, who's from Irwin, PA, and we have audience probably from Irwin, PA. It's a very beloved place for me because I drive through Irwin to get to Ligonier with great frequency. So I love Irwin, PA. Barbara, you are from a great place. And I believe you have 6 kids. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We have 6 now.
So just briefly, how did you meet Barbara? Because you're not from Irwin, PA, are you?
No, so we were both in the DC area. I was there for graduate school and she was living there at the time. And we actually met online. I was finishing up my graduate degree, my last year down there. And I figured I'd take my chances with some online. I don't call it online dating. I call it online meeting. And so, but I met her online and then set up a time to meet in person quickly after. And we hit it off right away.
Wow. Where did she go to school?
She went to Loyola first and then transferred to Maryland. So she was living up there.
You mentioned the word discern, which is a tough word sometimes for people to grasp. And in terms of dating and being able to finally discern that God wanted you to marry Barbara, how was your dating more of a discovery of like, this is the one?
Yeah, I mean, discernment is a very loaded word.
Yeah.
And I think what people don't realize is how much work goes into preparing the soil. To receive the call of God is to receive a seed, and that calling has to have the right nutrients and the right soil and the right conditions to be received in a life-giving way. So, I think that the preparation is just as important, more important, maybe even than knowing what is this seed, what is this fruit that's supposed to be born from this. And so I was almost 30 years old when I met Barbara, and I had been through a lot of life already, a lot of experiences socially with dating and getting to know people, especially getting to know myself. I discerned religious life for almost 4 years, and was very deep embedded in a life of prayer and really seeking God's will. So by the grace of God, I certainly made my mistakes, and I had, received his forgiveness and worked on myself. And when I met Barbara, by that time, the soil was well fertilized and ready. And it, according to his will, was the right time and place. And so at that point, and I certainly don't recommend this for everybody who's maybe 19 or 20, but when I saw her for the first time, we met at a restaurant, and I was sitting at a table waiting for her. And when she walked into the room, I just knew something was very different.
Hmm.
And through that conversation and that evening, I was like, I think this is it. And we were engaged 6 months later, and we were married 6 months after that. And we got pregnant right away. So within a year of meeting, we had a baby on the way, and we started our life together.
What would you say is the biggest challenge of a newlywed couple that just experienced like what you did? I think there are a lot of people who, well, not a lot of people, but there are some Catholic couples or couples who think the first year of marriage is going to be amazing, which maybe it was for you. But if huge life change, like you're 30 years old, then all of a sudden you're living, you and your wife are living together, and now you have a baby. So within 12 months, that's a paradigm shift, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, we definitely had a lot to work through, and we each had our own lives of our own independent living, and being almost 30 at that point, and I was pretty well taking care of myself at that point. So sharing a space, sharing a schedule, sharing a lifestyle together. We moved immediately up to Manhattan right when we got married, and we had a little studio apartment. So we started in 600 square feet on the Upper East Side, and that's where I wanted to start my practice. And we did that before we realized we were going to get pregnant right away. We weren't really thinking very clearly about that possibility, but we got pregnant, and I said to Barbara, I was like, well, we can make this work, right? I mean, we can have a baby here, and then, have at least one kid living in a studio apartment. She's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And then I started to look at the baby registry and all these things on the baby. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This kid is going to have more furniture than I do. We definitely can't stay in a 600 square foot studio. So, figuring those things out, there's a lot of practicalities that are, not quite obvious until you're kind of living in it.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, congratulations. It's such a great testimony to know. So how long have you been married now?
So just over 9 years now.
God bless you.
Yeah,
I've been blessed
been an awesome
to be a part of a marriage ministry or a foundation called Renew the I Do. And this past Saturday, we had over 200 couples, candlelight mass, because, Valentine's whole marriage week. And just all these candles were all, as most of the church was dimmed. It was an old style church, just beautiful, tall ceilings. It's called St. Augustine. And there's these candles just on either side, all the way down. Looked almost like a runway of just lights. And then each of them holding their candles. They held their crucifixes together, renewed their vows. We blessed them and all that. And there's a bunch of priests there celebrating. And as I was looking out at the end, I'm like, this looks like a runway. And it's like your love and God's grace are just going to lift you to that next level now. And so it's just a real beautiful time to just be able to cherish the marriages. So, Doc, I appreciate your witness to that. And I'm sure you can count on my prayers for your wedding and your marriage,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I just wanted to talk a little background on like how you recognized this need for a Catholic Psychology Institute, the IDD Mentorship, and more specifically, just reading a little bit about some of the things you've said and some of the things you've talked about. You've talked before. Maybe you could speak to this. Like, there's this crisis, this pain that is the new norm, and I would say it gets accelerated through COVID time and all the Corona stuff that's going on. And you ask the question, how did we get here? How is it possible that like some people who maybe they feel like they didn't do well on their math test and they go into a huge crisis would be the same as hearing that their parents are getting a divorce. Or a kid that got rejected from one university is the same thing as like an atomic bomb is going to attack us from Russia. You know what I mean? Like, how do we get here?
Well, that's a pretty deep, pretty huge question. But I think if I had to sum it up in a nutshell to go as high and deep and wide and as big as possible, society has lost God. We just don't have a normal cultural sense of being taken care of by God. And most people don't even have a paradigm in which we're created by God, that there is a God who's really actually a part of our life that we should know, that cares about us. So, it's just become normal, the normal zeitgeist, the normal sort of just atmosphere of the world that, we're randomly here and we all have to figure it out for ourselves, and it's totally relativistic. So whatever you figure out for you is fine, and I'm going to figure out for me. And as long as we don't bump elbows too much, then we're okay. And it's crazy because psychologically, behind every thought, wish, desire, fear is the striking realization that we die. And it's totally unavoidable. The old joke is the two unavoidable things of life are death and taxes. Yeah. And like usually it's to make a joke about taxes, but actually we kind of gloss over the part that we can't avoid death, and we all know it. So we're built from the ground up in our very biology. Even the people that accept a survival instinct in evolution know, like, we are built to avoid death. We have a survival instinct. And yet we all know that we die. So how can we carry on in our humanity with impending death? It's this completely natural fiction without bringing God into it. It's like we're completely disordered internally by this natural distortion. We want to live, but we know that we die. How do you make sense of that?
Right.
And so without having a sense of God, a father, eternity, being taken care of, that somebody else is in control, that we're actually loved, that we're safe, it's going to be okay. Little by little, it's infiltrated and taken root in us, that now, like, everything that we're seeing here today is the result of that core fundamental sense of God's presence missing from the world.
And from a psychological standpoint, what are some of those symptoms of a world that doesn't have God as a creator and that paradigm? Like, I remember studying philosophy, and you hear a lot about Heidegger and Gadamer, two Germans that basically set up an anthropology where we're like in a circus with a tent over it, and we're simply shot out of a cannonball with all these random things. So we have a time that we start and then we end. And that's it. That's our existence. And so if we live in that type of world, what are some of the things that you see or data points that you see that help us understand this, not just from a philosophical standpoint, but from like just a very practical clinician type of thing that you see?
Yeah. So like using that example, you're shooting through the air and you have an experience of what it is to be flying through the air, and it's terrifying. And so you have to make sense of it, and you have to try to like somehow feel safe, because we have these trauma responses that are happening, these anxiety responses that are happening. And the illusion is that somehow we can control this, that we can be in control. So when we don't have a sense of the Father being in control, we have to be in control. So then we work through what's called cognitive dissonance, which is that distortion. And it's like, okay, I'm actually not in control, but I know I need to be in control because I want to protect myself. So then I have to come up with ways to sort of alleviate that cognitive dissonance by pretending like I can actually be in control. And then we employ all of these mannerisms, and then it can become psychological disorder and psychopathology when, for instance, it's an anxiety disorder where somebody is going to become hypervigilant. And if I think about this problem enough, or if I replay that conversation in my mind enough, or if I anticipate all the things that could go wrong enough, somehow I'm exacting some control over the uncontrollable. And, scrupulosity comes from that, and OCD. And in the ways that we develop personality patterns, Like, I need to control the situation. Literally, you might have like narcissistic personality where I can command this room and I can make everybody like me. Some other people have a dependent personality style. It's like, well, as long as I be submissive and I apologize for everything and I never ruffle any feathers, then I'm safe. What are you doing? You're controlling the outcomes. You're protecting yourself. And there's a multitude of other facets of experience in between, that these are the ways we develop these illusions that we can actually control the uncontrollable.
And so part of what you've experienced or you've seen in trying to help people are, I don't know, did you see like this acting out in terms of addictions or suicide or cutting, things like that? How do you see this kind of playing itself out if you didn't respond?
Yeah, every one of those things we can look at. So, addictions, it's like there's this sense of need, of longing for something. This something is unfulfilled or unsatisfied, and you've latched on to this behavior as if that's going to bring you the answer, and then you keep trying to make it work. And no matter how much it's not working, you think, well, if I just keep doing it, it's gonna start working. And it's not thinking like it's a cognitive conscious process, but it's built into our patterns of behavior that the body is acting as if, and there are brain circuits that are acting as if just doing it a little bit more is actually going to end up satisfying you and you're going to feel better.
So it'd be like either an alcoholic or somebody's a sexaholic. They think, oh, if I could just reenact this drinking, I'll get it right. I'll only have one, and then that leads to another. Or
Exactly.
If it's a sexaholic, I could watch this porn just once, but I can control it. And all of a sudden, you're going into these addictive behaviors that you no longer have control, and your compulsion wins out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that are happening unconsciously without us really directly being in control of what we're doing with our behavior. So especially now with COVID and social isolation and people feeling really lonely, using the cell phone, using the technology, connecting to people on social media. It's like, if I just scroll a little bit further, it's going to satisfy this need for me to feel connected. I'm going to feel like I'm, engaging in community, and it never is enough. It's totally the opposite of what we're built for, because you're not actually giving yourself or actually receiving from somebody else's gift of self. But that's the illusion. So we keep on trying to think we can satisfy that.
It's so ironic, right? Like, the world today feels like it's easier to connect to like what's going on in Ukraine or the Olympics than the people around this global, whatever you call this, community. But it seems like psychologically and actually, we're actually more lonely, more moving into these behaviors and addictions and things. And the cure is relationship. It's connecting. And that's what you just said. So it's like the irony of all these social media things is we're actually, by disconnecting from normal human interaction, we feel like we're connecting, but it's not happening. You're right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because, from where we sit with our way of approaching problems, we really try to avoid compartmentalizing into one, side of an argument or another. We really try to see the full picture. And especially with technology, this is one of these hot button issues. And we actually really appreciate technology. I mean, the church appreciates technology. And so we try to find ways to use technology to the benefit of actually nurturing relationships. So we started an online membership and an app. We have a free app called the Integrated app, and I make people put their real profile picture and their real names, and we have rules about real communication that happens inside of this app. And so it's like right off the bat, we're setting a precedent for why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it. This is to actually nurture a community between people that are disconnected, not to hide behind a profile picture of your dog or some flowers and come up with some fancy name and whatever. But, we can use technology for we took therapy and developed it into a whole nother way of accompanying people that we call mentorship. And it's a daily interaction, which is more connected. It's more relationship than even the old model of secular psychotherapy. And we're using technology to do it, but we're also maintaining the intimacy of real relationship. And we're finding that people are healing faster, more efficiently, and going deeper and farther than they ever thought they were going to with the old model of psychotherapy. And it's more than we've ever experienced, even from therapy.
So it's as if you found that there's such a isolation. There's these perhaps psychological rabbit holes we get into, and we think reenacting is going to actually get us out of it. But it's healthy relationships. First, our own mind and a relationship to our creator, and then our healthy relationships with others. And I think that's why I was fascinated by you quoting, or this is an important discourse that St. John Paul II gave. I just wanted to read quickly this because I think it really moves into this, moving away from this unhealthy anthropology, or this kind of what I've described before as like being a cannonball shot out, into the Catholic anthropology. And so St. John Paul II says this, I think it was in a World Youth Day talk: "It is Jesus, in fact, that you seek when you dream of happiness. He is waiting for you when nothing else you find satisfies you. He is the beauty to which you're so attracted. It is he who provokes you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. It is he who urges you to shed the masks of false lies. It is he who reads in your hearts the most genuine choices, the choices that others try to stifle. It is Jesus who stirs in you the desire to do something great with your lives, that will to follow an ideal, the refusal to allow yourselves to be grounded by mediocrity, the courage to commit yourselves humbly and patiently to improving yourselves and society, making the world more human and more fraternal." Why is that for you so important and such like a part of your ethos?
Oh gosh, I could talk for 4 hours on this.
Well, give us whatever you want to say.
Yeah, well, we will go 4 hours, but it connects the dots to so many pieces of what's missing. And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the model. And as it says in Gaudium et Spes, Jesus reveals man to himself. So the beauty, the majesty, the infinite mystery, and just the humbling, mind-blowing, cosmically crazy reality that we are made in God's image. Like we say that, we flippantly say those words. They leave our lips and we have no clue what we're saying. And we don't realize how good we are. And we have these desires that are infinite because we are made in the image of the infinite, and it's coming from within us. And it's a reminder of who modeled us and who we're made in the model of and what we're made for, that we're made to unite to him, to become like him, and to be one with him, and to actually become divine in union with the divine. And people don't know this. And the travesty of this is it's because and I can say this with you because I know you're not the person that I'm implicating in this statement, but the messengers of this truth are failing their job of not teaching this. And what I see happening in the world and in the church and how we got here, why does the culture not have God? To come back to your first question, because the church has not communicated God. The witnesses, the missionaries, the disciples have not preached the gospel. And we don't know that we are made in the image of God, that we have infinite dignity and value. And so it's just been this like trickling out of like a little by little, just like this disintegration of our sense of selves. And so when JP2 is like reminding us, he's coming back to, he's like, it's Jesus that you seek when you long for happiness. See, he's not saying it's Jesus that you seek when you long for holiness. And I've been I was talking to a Catholic podcaster once with a very popular podcaster, and this person, I said something about happiness, and this person said, yeah, but we want to be careful, right? We don't want to really sort of like encourage people going after happiness. Like that's what the world is doing. And I was just like, oh gosh, like, let's back this up a second. JP2 said he reached into where the people were, people who don't necessarily know Jesus, people who don't know JP2, people who don't know the church at all, people who've been hurt by the church. And he's saying, you want to be happy. You know, what human person is going to say, no, I don't, you know, wrong, you don't know me. Just anybody. You want to be happy, don't you? Okay, we're building a bridge. Let me tell you the secret. Let me tell you who's on the other side of that. Not just the fulfillment of that, but the whole reason you have the desire in the first place. It's because of Jesus that you're made in his image, that you want to be happy, and it's only Jesus who's ever going to fulfill and satisfy happiness. So this is what's missing in the world. And what we're called to do as missionaries and evangelists and disciples is to bring Jesus to people, but the way that Jesus brought himself to people, which is he met people where they were. He's like, you know what? You're suffering. You're getting water from this well in the middle of the day in the hot sun. What's going on in your life? Like, who are you? Tell me about, what are you looking for? You want love? Oh, you're spurned because you have all these husbands and everybody knows your reputation. Oh gosh, let me meet you there. I see you. What are you looking for? Love. You're looking to be seen. I see you. Changes everything. So JP2 nailed it in everything he said and did and taught and wrote and he's the reason for everything I do. and so, you know, obviously Jesus is the reason for everything I do, but if it wasn't for JP2, I don't know where I would be. But reading his words and knowing his life and responding to his invitation to me as a youth in Paris in 1997 at World Youth Day, and in the year 2000 Jubilee year, when I first read Love and Responsibility, and then as I dove into the theology of the body, it gave meaning to the rest of my life. And so it's, you know, following out how he communicated that message. And
Doctor, we disconnected a little bit there. We'll get you back on in a second here. But I think, well, hold on one second. So I think one of the things that it just struck me is obviously my personal vocation was inspired by him reaching out and touching me. But as these German philosophers who we quoted before were kind of limiting our humanity and our anthropology to just the here and now and being these at the best an instinctive reaction to what's going on in nature, he totally offered our church and humanity an anthropology based in Genesis, like where we came from. Not just the music group by Phil Collins, but the actual biblical narrative of why we're here and theology of the body and all that. And that's like, I didn't know that's what he was doing when I met him, but that's what you feel. That's what your heart was racing. It's like, yes, I dream of happiness. And he's able to say that happiness is not going to be by being addicted to things and being enslaved to this, because he saw the way the Nazis did that to his friends and family. He's like, that's not where the happiness is by forcing people down something and manipulating them. It's by freeing them. And that like revolutionized everything, didn't it?
Well, it's true, but he also was a student of the contemporary times. And so it's really fascinating to see in his mind the importance of the here and now. And, you know, to see how idealism. Are we glitching here? Are we back?
We've glitched a couple times. I think we're back now.
Okay. To see how idealism can actually be abused from the left and the right. And we have to be grounded and centered in the experience of the human person. So, and that's why he's this genius mind who could take phenomenology and ground it on Genesis and on metaphysics and on timeless truth, and then present this recapitulation of the timeless truth in language that people of today can hear and understand. And so he's doing this both and, which is his magic. Like, he did that all the time. And he would really always come up with like a third way that you weren't expecting. And it's profound.
It is. And that's why I'm so grateful for you and Dr. Brian, your whole team, to be able to capture his charism of JP2 and now be able to translate that into an effective way to really inspire people to find the best version of themselves, which was created by us, by God, and now to be able to live that out. So talk a little bit about the Catholic Psych Institute, and then obviously we'll get to the IDD mentorship. What's its mission, and why'd you guys start it?
Yeah, good question. So I like I said, when I first encountered JP2 in 2000 with Love and Responsibility, I read that book like a marriage therapy manual. And I was a freshman in college. I actually started at Boston College. I was taking classes with Peter Kreeft. I was learning philosophy from him, and he's very much in line with the same kind of existential Thomism that was in the same wheelhouse as JP2 in a lot of ways.
He actually had him on the program a couple months ago with Peter Kreeft, and it was just oh my gosh, he loves the Boston Red Sox, so he's very practical with stuff like that. And all of a sudden,
great.
You can ask him the greatest questions in the world, and within like 2 phrases, he'll summarize it, have the perfect thing, and then be like, "Okay, next question." You're like, "Wait, you just told me what heaven, hell, and purgatory are going to be like, and hit it perfectly. Now we're on to the next subject."
He's just genius. He's such an amazing man. When he wrote the foreword to my book, The Mindful Catholic, and I actually went to him at King's College and to talk to him about it. And we met for lunch, and then he was like, "Well, do you want to go to the game?" And so I was like, "Sure." And he presents me the option. He goes, "Do you want to play ping pong, chess, or pool?" And I was like, "This has got to be a test." And I was like, "Well, I don't think ping pong's the right answer. Maybe it is." But I was like, "I'm not really great at chess, and I'm sure he'll just destroy me." I was like, "All right, let's play pool." We go to the student center. We start playing pool. And then another student of his walks in, and he asks this kid, "Do you want to play chess?" And I was like, "Well, this is weird." But then he starts playing a chess match with this other kid in between shots with me playing billiards. And he beats both of us.
That's Dr. Kreeft for you.
He's amazing. But when I read that, I knew that there was this this chip inside of my brain automatically connected the dots to psychology with these timeless truths of the faith. And I wanted to just spend my life figuring out how to help people by regurgitating these theological truths in ways that are psychologically practical. And Love and Responsibility is a perfect first example. And then after that, it just continued. And so the Catholic Psych Institute was born of a mission to provide psychology that was trustworthy from the church, so that the church could basically have a referral source or a referral, someplace to send people for referrals. And from there, it just grew. The need was so deep that I started getting new interns. People wanted to learn what I was doing and how I was doing it. And so we grew and grew. Now we have a new mission. We discovered, where I've figured out along the way, this problem is really dire. And what I've discovered is, just kind of like came to this realization, is that there is no standard of mental health and wellness in the church.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is there's no definition. There's no clear sense of what it means to be mentally healthy. There's no Catholic gold standard. And without a standard, it leaves wide open every kind of interpretation possible. And we end up with all of these wide swinging pendulums of sort of going in this direction or that direction. And then it gets very political, and it gets based on biases and all different things. And so
like we have a gold standard for scripture. It's called the Bible. That was
Right.
defined. Boom. We have a gold standard for the sacraments. They're all well defined. And now you're saying, but what's the gold standard for psychology?
Right. And if you think about, like, if we have a gold standard for nutrition,
Yeah. Okay.
we have a gold standard for, and maybe there's disagreements on certain parts of the definitions, but like beauty, even beauty has a clearer sense of a gold standard than mental health. And so what ends up happening is the church will need to find some place to send people who are suffering, but they don't know why they're sending people to these places. They have no way to judge what is actually happening or going on. And they don't even have a clear sense, because there is no Catholic way to do therapy. This is really radical, what I'm saying right now.
Exactly.
There's no Catholic way to do therapy. There are plenty of devout, faithful, holy Catholics who are therapists. And the therapy that they're doing is the therapy they learned in school that they got a degree for, which was capable of it was validated to become a licensable degree by a state. So that degree, that program, that accreditation, that state giving that license are licensing secular therapies. And there's nothing Catholic about them. And there's actually a lot of disagreement in between the different models of therapies. It's becoming more obvious that this is a problem, because now they're actually going directly against the Catholic worldview and a Christian anthropology of what it is to be human. But there is nothing built into the system of psychology itself, secularly, to protect against that ever happening, because there's no paradigm of actual Catholic therapy. So what we're now setting ourselves up for is to create a standard. I started off by saying we're going to create the new standard of Catholic health and wellness. But then I realized there's not an old standard. There is no standard. So if we want to
there is a grounding for this, which is what you started with in your question, or what you had mentioned about Catholic anthropology. I mean, it's the foundation for this is getting anthropology right. If you get anthropology wrong, everything else unfolds in the wrong way.
100%. And if days of old, your spiritual director, your priest, the church in its theology, in its spirituality, would give you everything you need to have a standard of wellness. But where culture has gone now, and we're talking about all these other things, the thing that people don't understand about culture and about time, the shifting of time, like every 50 years, it's like the world is a whole different place to live. So the way we talk now about our feelings, our experience, how do I respond to this? What's my reaction? People of the older generation now can see the radical shift that's happened in the last 10 years, where even you said, like, the student who is just as upset about his math grade as if his parents are getting divorced.
Right.
Like, that's not just a symptom of a disease. That's a cultural shift. And what that means is now those kids are going to be the adults 10, 15 years from now who are the church. And now that's the new environment that needs to be ministered to. They need a standard of how to be healthy. And they're not going back to, whatever, Saint Francis Xavier said, or Saint Vincent de Paul said, or whatever you're reading in the spiritual writings of Teresa of Avila about fasting and penance. Like, that's not going to help. At one point, it changed the world, but it's not going to help today, because the environment is totally different. That's why the theology of the body was so groundbreaking. That could have been actually like a whole paradigm shift if it caught on, if it was supported, if there were people actually, taking it and running with it on a larger scale. But so anyways, this is, as we're sort of like bringing together this anthropology, and 100% what you said, if we get the anthropology right, then we have the grounding to know what is helpful for people and what is not. What kind of relationship would be hurtful? What kinds of spiritual practices are good? What kind of spiritual practices can be hurtful? And so on and so forth. There's all sorts of consequences to not having the right anthropology, or to figuring out what a good anthropology is.
Right. And so you've created this new standard for mental health. How do people get access to it, and what are the different facets to it to be able to help people who maybe are interested, or just help me to try to navigate a parish?
Yeah, so tons of tons of answers to that question, tons of opportunities, and I'm like, our team and we're just like working like crazy to figure out how to best answer that question. We're developing a curriculum of a kind of certification to really dig deep into unpacking what this looks like. In the meantime, one thing that we did is we took a step back from the secular model of therapy and really just questioned it.
So hold on, the secular model, because I actually, Dr. Brian, who's one of your teammates there, he has been my go-to person for a long time now. And at first, when I understood psychological therapy, you would sit down in a room, probably with a sofa, you'd lay back, and then you'd tell them all your things, and then they would tell you something. That was kind of like what you saw in a movie, and maybe that was therapy for a while, right?
Right, exactly.
So, but it was an in-person thing that you talked to. And then my first experience with Dr. Brian was through Zoom and being able to talk to him like that. And now we actually speak through Voxer, which is like this voicemail methodology. So on one hand, at least for me, it took away maybe the shame or the stigma that you could say of like, oh, I'm going into a public place and sitting in a in a room knowing that I'm going to see a psychologist or whatever, right? And so now with Voxer, or this current system that you guys have, I actually can get a mentor relationship with Dr. Brian on my own time. So it could be 3 p.m, it could be 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and I could leave him a voicemail and he can get back and talk. So all I'm trying to do is prep you, Dr. Greg, to be able to kind of walk us through that, because for me, it's been a tremendous help to be able to just kind of say what was on my mind when it was on my mind, rather than waiting for like this all-encompassing appointment that I didn't feel like I could get everything out in 1 hour.
Right.
And now it's just become this back and forth. And even though it's kind of weird, I still have some resistance. I like being in person. It drives me nuts that I can't be, but I find other ways to develop that relationship. And so it's an avenue, or it's a way that I can develop a relationship with that. So go ahead, speak to that a little bit. I just wanted to kind of give a personal background to this.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great tee up here. Thank you. And it's, I'm incredibly grateful that you've been blessed by this program, and just took a step back and asked the same question. Is this a manifestation of Christ in the world? Like, what is our vocation as healing people? I hesitate to even say therapists, because it's such a secularly based word, but if I want to accompany people with an expertise in psychology and the human person, which includes a necessity for spirituality, how would Christ do it? What would Jesus do? And I was thinking about the road to Emmaus, that he's walking with the men on the road to Emmaus. I was thinking about, we've always used Simon of Cyrene as a model for our job, our role, which is already different from a secular model. Like, we know we're not actually taking away people's crosses. We don't set out to do that at all. But for a time on a person's journey, we can relieve some of the burden. And that's all we aim to do, because we know the power of the cross, and we would never want to take away the cross from somebody. It's the cross that goes to the resurrection. So we took a step back and thought, how can we do this like Christ would? First of all, it's got to be more than 45 minutes once a week.
Yes.
Like, how does that make any sense?
No, it doesn't.
And so we're like, all right, how could we do this on a daily basis with somebody? Like, how could we actually walk with somebody as a part of their life, integrated into their life, not separated out, this one little pocket of time compartmentalized once a week? And then we're thinking about technology. What could that help us do better, make us more accessible? And that's where the voice messages, it's this amazing thing that happens when you have something recorded, and then you get to step outside of time to actually meet people in their life. And like you said, you might have something you want to share at 3 o'clock in the morning, well, it's kind of unreasonable to expect that you're going to have literally a human person on call to be in relationship with anytime you feel like it. But if we separate out the time piece, and you can go what they call asynchronous right now, which is like part of online learning and everything else, then you can record that message, and then we're going to listen to it when we can, and we're going to respond to you. And so we have this model where we go back and forth every 24 hours, within 24 hours. And you can, leave your messages anytime you really need to. So that's one example of what we learned by stepping away from the confines of what's taught in secular models and just asking the bigger question was, how would we do this in a Christian way? And how could the method actually be Catholic more than just me as a person happening to be Catholic?
Right. And we have up on the screen, IDDmentor.com. Anybody interested in receiving the benefits that I have through a great mentor, it's a great thing to maybe check out if you're interested in this, IDDmentor.com. I get the question all the time about, hey, do you have any Catholic therapists you recommend? And a lot of them are so busy, it's hard to even get them to think about that. And so perhaps this IDD mentorship is a way of moving towards healing and being able to be the best version of yourself. And so I appreciate the services that you guys are offering as well. CatholicPsych.com, is it, or is it .org? I can't remember. .com.
CatholicPsych.com
is the bigger picture of the group that you've started as well.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about the maybe this concept of the mindful Catholic, because it's really cool what you're doing, all these different ways to connect people to healthy psychology and to be able to grow like that. But you have a specific thing that it's like, wow, there's a secret sauce here. Like Pittsburgh, I think, is where we invented the Big Mac. So that's a great thing to be known for. And the special sauce, right? Because, I mean, I imagine that there will be other psychological groups offering Vox or other types of things, which, again, maybe you're the only ones doing that. But what I found to be truly unique is the mindful Catholic and walking through these steps with that. So there's the book. I recommend it. I love the book. And before I get off this today, I will commit to doing this wonderful kind of sacramental pause with Dr. Greg. But before that, just give us a little background on that. And if you want, tell people why that is such a groundbreaking experience for Catholics, especially, but that you've seen.
Yeah, this is very personal to me because it has to do with my time with the friars. And I was discerning religious vocation for 3.5 years with the CFRs. Some people might know Father Benedict Rochelle, who is a psychologist priest, and he had a show on EWTN. He was one of the founders of the CFRs. And I got to spend a lot of time with him, and he really taught me how to pray. And, long story short, I realized that I had a lot of wounds. My parents were divorced, and part of me was seeking to resolve the pain of my own parents' marriage through religious life. But these were very unconscious walls that were deep in my heart. So I was very happy. I was joyful. Everybody thought I had a vocation to religious life. I had passed flying colors, all the tests, all the, formation council meetings, everything. When I eventually said I was going to leave, they were shocked. They thought it was the devil. It took me a year to convince the formation council to let me go. And, as I was learning how to pray from Father Benedict, he directed me towards a spirituality of the abandonment to divine providence. And he helped me understand the practice of the present moment. And he would lead me in prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament in a way that I would get out of my head the ruminations of my mind and the stresses and anxieties and the narratives and the thought, and bring me down into a deeper place of silence where all of a sudden you're just present even to the narratives and ruminations, but present to everything, the Eucharist, the floor, the ground, the sounds, the air, my breath, everything, just present in the present moment. Then I left the friars. I went to graduate school. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 2 years, and I was taught a very effective methodology used in hospitals, which has now taken on even more popularity called dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a group therapy method. And then part of that was something called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And this is beginning before there was all the gurus and all the all the YouTube videos and about mindfulness, everything that's on Oprah and Dr. Phil and everywhere else. So this was just a protocol used in a hospital. And it was incredibly effective. And I learned how to do it. And I used it with my patients. And then all of a sudden I realized what I'm doing now internally feels exactly like what I felt like as Father Benedict was teaching me how to be in God's presence in the moment. And it just dawned on me that this is the same thing. It's a secular introduction to going to a place where God actually wants to meet us. And by connecting those dots, I was able to bring together this new program, and I was able to say, okay, here's what the psychological sciences says works in the brain. Here's why it works spiritually speaking, and how now we can go past the psychological technique and actually nurture a deeper spirituality. So we have to go through our brain because we're human, and then we can go above our brain, transcend our brain, because we're made to be in relationship with God. To very simply put it, you go to church, you're not going to hear the homily if you're stressed out about who's coming for dinner later that day.
Exactly.
So how do you sit in the pew at church and be present to the graces that are there, to the words that are being spoken, the scripture that's being read, and that sacrament? You have to learn how to maneuver this thing in between your ears. And that is not a spiritual thing. That's a psychological thing. So we bring the two together, and that's how powerful this is.
You call it one very simple aspect that you call it the sacramental pause. Would you be willing to just take me through that? And anybody who's listening could also just follow along with that and just take whatever time it takes for us to do that.
Sure thing. Yeah. The sacramental pause would be one exercise, and there's a whole series of exercises, and I have all these exercises out there for free. So if you go to catholicsite.com/store.
Okay.
We have a bunch of free stuff that's available there on the shop or the store. Anyways, you go to the website, you'll see the link there. And we have something called the virtual retreat, and we have the exercises that go along with my book. If you get the book, there's a link there to get the exercises. It's all free. And so
that's awesome.
There's a number of different exercises. The sacramental pause is what it's a simple exercise, and it reconnects you to the present moment. And so Brother Lawrence, who wrote a book, Praying in the Practice of the Presence of God, he talks about the sacrament of the present moment. And a sacramental is something that connects us to God. It's not a full sacrament of supernatural.
Yeah, the Kent Ashes, or we here in Pittsburgh would call Palm Sunday those biblical terrible towels that we wave, that type of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So holy water.
Holy water.
A scapular. Like
Exactly.
These are the little things that. Yeah. So the present moment itself can be seen as a sacramental.
That's beautiful.
And so I see that, and so that's why I call this the sacramental pause, because we're actually letting the present moment become the thing that connects us to God. And so it's through this present moment, but we have to decide to pause. And then, so that's the first thing, is the act of the will. Like we have to actually choose to do this. And then I can give you the sort of meat and potatoes of, okay, what do you do now? Like you decided to pause, so now what? And so just a brief introduction to it would be that our five senses tie us into the present moment. And I call the imagination, all the thoughts that we have in our mind, the sixth sense. And the difference between our first five senses and our sixth sense is that our five senses are limited to the present time and place. So in other words, when you feel the chair you're sitting on, that data point getting to your brain about the feeling of the chair has to be the chair here and now. You're not feeling a chair 10 minutes from now. You're feeling a chair now. When you smell a smell, it's now. When you hear a sound, it's now. It's in the present moment. It's tied to the present moment. Our sixth sense, our imagination, can go beyond time and space. So we can think about dinner and what it's going to smell like later as a thought. We can go outside of this room and think about what's happening in another state, another country, another place. So the imagination is untethered to the present moment. God is the eternal present moment, and we can encounter him where he is if we go where he is with our mind, our cognitive power. So we want to turn towards one of those 5 senses. And so that's the basic gist of all of the mindfulness exercises, is we want to learn how to get our minds to control what we're focusing on. And even of the 5 senses, you can pick one of the 5 that you actually turn your attention towards. So I can tell you, pay attention to the chair that you're sitting on, and you feel the feelings of physical touch. I can say, okay, now listen to the sounds that are coming in your room. You can turn your attention towards sense of sound or the sense of sight and so on. So with the sacramental pause, it's basically a quick and dirty way to, quick and easy way to capture your attention into the present moment. And the basic gist of it is we think about an hourglass, like the old hourglasses that you flip over to get the sand running through it. And it's got a wide top, and then it's got a narrow middle, and then it's got a wide bottom. And so what we want to be able to do is turn our attention towards anything that's happening in the present moment through any of our senses, including our 6th sense, even if we're aware of the thought that we're having. But if we're aware of it, then it's happening now in this present moment. And then we're going to narrow into our breath itself. And then we're going to open up to other feelings in the body. And we're just going to be with our body physically in the physical sense, only the physical sense, but opening up to anywhere where the physical body is. So I'll lead you through it now. We can actually do it practically.
That'd be great.
And, but I want to give a little, so if anybody's following along, you have a sense of the direction that we're going in.
So I've made the decision to want to pause. I've made the decision to want to not worry that I have 3 trillion things going on tomorrow, today, all that stuff. I just want to be in the present moment.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to meet you there, and I'm going to take you to the next step. So first of all, what we do is we always want to just start with the awareness that we probably carry a lot of tension in our body and everything else. So just kind of shake out the shoulders a little bit and settle into your seat a little bit. Put your feet flat on the floor, and take anything off your lap that's there. Just keep the distractions away. Of course, put the phone away if somebody's holding their phone or whatever. And then you just settle into your seat with your neck and back straight up, your arms on your lap. Either put your hands right on your knees or fold them in your lap. And first of all, think about just the sense of having dignity. Recognizing the fact that you are a child of God, the creator of the universe, the king of the universe. That you're the child of a king. And sort of let that settle in and think about that, holding that dignity with your posture. Let your posture be a manifestation of your dignity. And as you line up your posture and settle into your seat, just take a deep breath. Slow, deep. And then as you exhale, just let the tension come out of your body. And do that a couple times. Just slow, deep inhales and exhales. And as we go through an exercise, there's going to be lots of thoughts that come into your mind, and it's okay. There's never an intention to keep your mind blank at all in any mindfulness that we do. It's all about acceptance and allowance and noticing and awareness. And then as we're settled in here, I always start with a little prayer. It's a Catholic mindfulness prayer. It goes like this. Ever-present God, here with me now, help me to be here with you. And Father, if you're as you're listening or listeners, as you're listening, you can just pray that in your own mind as I'm praying it. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. And the first step is a wide scope, just a broad brush look over anything you're feeling, anything that registers in your awareness. Could be anything that you feel, smell, hear. It could be thoughts going on in your mind. It's like we just have a flashlight in a dark room and we're just shining it around to see what we see. But through senses. It could be whatever is sensory awareness, whatever is piquing your awareness. And as you come aware of things, practice a disposition of non-judgmental awareness. And what that means is we're just letting things be as they are without taking on the added work of deciding anything about it. So if you have a stressful thought that comes into your mind, you can simply say, there's a stressful thought. Sometimes I imagine putting a little ribbon around it or a label on it, and it could just say, stressful thought. It could be worry about the future. It could be regret about something that happened. It could be something else like annoyance, irritation. It could be something else like confusion. If this is one of the first times somebody's listening to an exercise like this, sometimes there's thoughts of, what the heck is going on here? I don't know that. What's that? Where is this going? What's his point? What is he doing? Notice that thought happening in your mind and let it be there as a thought in your mind. You don't have to do anything with it. And let your scanning just kind of pan around to your body. Do you feel anything? If your breath comes into view of your awareness, you can pay attention to that for a moment. You might pick out little sounds in the room. Just getting comfortable with this sense of just being open and aware. Receiving all the data points that are getting communicated to your brain. And the next step is we're going to take that focus, that attentional control, and we're going to direct it specifically now to the breath. The breath is an interesting part of our human experience because it's always moving. Especially when people are just beginning this kind of practice, it's easier to pay attention to something that is moving than something static. We're more susceptible to distraction when there's nothing happening. So the breath is interesting because it's always something happening. So that's why it's often used in these exercises. There's nothing necessarily esoteric or magical or special about the breath as a point of a mindfulness exercise. But because of its dynamic nature, it's easier to pay attention to. So now turn towards this function of breathing. And as you inhale, you just notice the temperature changing in your mouth and your nose, however you're breathing. As you exhale, notice that breath coming out. Notice the temperature of the inhale and the temperature of the exhale. Notice if it changes. Notice if it feels dry or if you notice a wet feeling in your mouth. As you continue to inhale and exhale, you can pay attention to physical sensation of your chest expanding and contracting, subtle shifts of the movement of clothing. And this time, if thoughts are coming into your mind, you can still notice them and then gently redirect your attention back to your breath. Thoughts will happen always, and it's okay to notice them. It's okay to even still label them. But now we just have more of an intentional direction of returning that focus back to the breath. You might notice thoughts about your breath. Sometimes people wonder if I'm breathing correctly, or if I'm breathing too fast or too slow, or if this is the right kind of breath for this exercise. There is no right or wrong breath for the exercise. It's just your breath, and you're just paying attention to it. And now the third step is we widen our focus to the whole physical body. You can start off with certain parts of the body, or you can try to feel the whole body at once. Your mind might dart around to different points. If you feel your feet on the floor, or your bottom on the floor, or your back against the chair, you might feel your hands in your lap or touching each other. And you can start to be a little bit more sensitive in the perception of your clothing laying gently on your body. If you have a collar, maybe it's rubbed up against your neck. Just feeling different dimensions of your body. Feel your whole body fill with air as you inhale, and the movement of your whole body as you exhale. Again, allowing any thoughts to come and go as they come and go, without the need to change them or block them or make them go away. As we bring this sacramental pause to a close, we can also remember that God made us in His image with these bodies. Paying attention to your body is like spending time at a museum, appreciating a work of art painted by the hand of a master. That you are giving yourself attention, you're also giving glory to God and worship of the creator of the universe and the creator of who you are, with your breath, with your body, with your senses, with your mind, the way it works, the way that you can control it, that you can actually direct your focus and your attention. Those faculties specifically handcrafted by the touch of the master who created you. That spending this time is valuable and is worth your time. And He, ever present, is here now with you. As real, as present, as if another person was actually sitting right next to you. Ever present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. And when you're comfortable, you can take another deep breath and then open your eyes.
Wow, I don't want to come back.
It's like a little mini retreat, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it totally is. I have these earphones into my ears, so I was like feeling that, and then I can really hear and experience my breath. And so it was really cool to just being able to like focus on that to then get out of all these other stressful things that I'm doing in my life. And then just being led like that was so helpful. In the Ignatian spiritual world, there was this conception of at the beginning of a meditation, the composition of place, imagining yourself. But in order to get yourself to a specific gospel scene or something, you have to get a hold of yourself to do that. And that is what you just did, is something that was so helpful whenever I do that, to get into prayer and not just be in the rumination of all my stresses. It's not to avoid that, but it's to bring your whole self into the presence of Jesus, and not just, I'm stressed out, Jesus, solve this problem. And that doesn't really do much for me. Probably gets me more anxious than anything else. Doctor,
yeah, it's a great point. And it's actually, a lot of people will ask or wonder, like, is this a kind of spirituality that you're teaching, or is this prayer? And usually I just tell people right off the bat, this is not prayer.
No,
it's a brain exercise.
Right.
But it's really helpful to start prayer with this, like you're saying, because, and then you would go to adoration, and then you would go into praying the rosary, and you can actually focus on the mysteries instead of losing track of them, or an Ignatian prayer exercise like that. So I think it's important to delineate that and really define it very well.
Right. Yeah. Like, if you're going to go do exercise, if you're going to go play a game, you want to exercise before you do the warm-ups. And
right.
So it's like for prayer, I remember in seminary one day, they're saying, before you get to adoration, think of a truck with all this fuel. If all of a sudden there's a red light and you have to stop that truck going 65 miles an hour, it's going to spill all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not going to be. But if you say, okay, in 15 minutes, I'm going to go to adoration. So your mind starts to click, and then all of a sudden you come to a slow stop. Or at least for me, one of the hardest things is Mass. Of like, I'm doing a trillion things, all of a sudden 6 p.m. Mass, and I'm still going around 100 miles an hour. This can be such a great way in the sacristy or in our cars or before Mass starts to be able to be present to the present that God's giving us. Doctor, I could stay all day talking to you, but I think our time has ended. I just wanted to give a quick program note. Next week, February 24th, we're going to be talking to Emma Sabados. She is our tremendous faith formation coordinator of our little ones, the middle school, the grade school kids. And so we're going to be talking all things catechesis and helping our little kids get to know and experience Jesus Christ, First Communion, confession, or confirmation, and all that wonderful way in which we are praying to God that we can inspire these kids to have real relationship with Jesus Christ, and through that become the holy men and women that the Lord's created them to be. Dr. Greg, thanks for spending time with me today. And if you see Dr. Brian, my great mentor, tell him I said hello. But just really appreciate all the time and effort you've put into really bringing about this healing process. When you see Jesus go out and touch the world, and in the Gospels literally go and heal people, that's what you guys are doing for me, and which I know you're doing for all those who have benefited from your work. You're allowing that healing power of Jesus to be activated in a world that's so needed to be healed. So praise God.
Praise God. Thank you so much, Father. Thank you for your ministry and everything you're doing too, and for having me on. It's a great pleasure.
All right. God bless.